There is an arc, a moral compass, charting freedom's wax and wane. Sometimes we're startled how that arc allows some things hard to explain. But when the cause we fight is right, no matter what, we must persist. That arc is long and bends toward justice when we resist. Oh yeah.
Nolan Williams Jr. I want to make sure I get the junior in there.
Please.
Award-winning composer. He's a creator of the award-winning civil rights anthem. That's what we're going to talk about today, the Just Like Selma. And we know you. Many people may not know, but you are the creative force and the founding CEO of New Works Productions, a premier producer of socially impactful arts. I just love that phrase. Arts and entertainment since 2003, a true multi-hyphenate, multiple award-winning producer, composer, lyricist, music director, playwright, filmmaker, musicologist, and cultural curator.
Which is just a fancy way of saying I'm always busy.
You're always busy, and this just I got to tell you, I'm very, very excited to talk to you because there's something about the work that you do and just the array of things that you're doing. It's just central to our community. And so today we're talking because we're coming up on the weekend of the anniversary of the crossing in Selma, the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And you've written something called Just Like Selma, and it's been called a civic hymn, very well received and acclaimed, award-winning already. Can you tell us a little bit, not just about the inspiration, but why a civic hymn? Educate us a little bit.
Yeah, well, the thing I've always loved about hymns, and I've grown up on hymns, it's, hymns are one of the primary teaching tools that we have in the church. It's through the hymns that we learn theology, we learn Christology, those are just fancy ways of saying we learn who God is, how God operates. We learn who Christ is, how Christ operates. We also learn pneumatology, the role of the Holy Spirit, right, in the life of the believer. So hymns teach us. And the early hymn writers understood that. They understood the power of the text, which is the reason why the texts have stood the test of time. And it's also the reason why in Christian faith traditions, we will hold a hymnal right next to a Bible, right? And you'll have a preacher quote a hymn just as quickly as he's quoting or she's quoting scripture. And that's really important, right? That we understand that. And so in that spirit, it seemed to me that particularly as we look at what has been happening in our world and in our nation, there have been a lot of questions for me about the role of the church in, this kind of social landscape. If you go back 6 decades ago to the era of Selma, the church was front and center, particularly the Progressive National Baptist Convention and those factions of other denominations or those leaders of other denominations that were forward thinking. It is a misnomer to say that all Black churches were in support of the movement. They weren't. That's just not how that went down. But there were enough that were at the forefront, and they literally led the social conversation. They were present in the social sphere, and they were actively leading movements and galvanizing people and pushing for change. Now, in this day and time, we have leaders that are bold enough to speak, but I've been wondering in recent years, where are the galvanized efforts? Why are we not coming together? And why is the church not at the fore of the conversation. Particularly if you look at the most recent kinds of movements, whether it's Say Our Name, whether it's Black Lives Matter, those did not start in the church. They started in the community. And then the church kind of, factions of the church have gotten on board, have supported that. But 6 decades ago, it was the exact opposite. It was the other way around. So all of those thoughts are, kind of what led me down that path towards eventually recognizing that a hymn could be that force. It's something that we can sing in our churches. It's something that could galvanize communities of faith together. And, since we released this project on King's birthday, January 15th of this year, we've just been amazed at how God has really used this project to impact and to galvanize, to bring people together.
Tell us a little bit about what that was like to go back and trace and track a lot of the music that maybe people didn't know where it came from,
Yeah.
or all, trying to validate and verify that.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. It's a big question. Let me go back and just kind of clarify a couple of things. I'm the chief music editor of the African American Heritage Hymnal.
Mhm.
I'm an associate editor of the National Baptist Convention's hymnal, which was called Total Praise.
Mm.
And then I'm the third most leading contributing arranger to the Lead Me, Guide Me African American Catholic Hymnal. That's volume 2. So I think that's how that goes. It's been a while since I've thought about that. But, going back to this African American Heritage Hymnal, what's powerful about this book is that it grew out of the worship life of a congregation where I was on the ministerial staff, the Michigan Park Christian Church, right here in Northeast Washington. Dolores Carpenter at the time was pastor. And I was in divinity school, and I was working there as associate. What did they call me then? I was not associate minister. I was called something else. But anyway, I was on the staff. And what I realized was that this church had gone through a very interesting journey. I should call it a sojourn. At one point, it was an all-white congregation led by a minister named Pastor Asline. At some point during the 50s, white folks started to flee the district for the suburbs. And as Black folks started to move into neighborhoods like North Michigan Park.
Mm-hmm.
And so this church went from being all white to a mixed congregation, and eventually became all Black. And through that entire transformation, this white minister, Pastor Asline, remained the leader of that faith community. When they made the transition from Asline to Carpenter, you could not ask for a more radical shift in leadership to go from Pastor Asline to Dolores Carpenter, who at that time was one of the few Black women leading a congregation in the nation. I mean, it was really unheard of for Black women to be extended that opportunity to pastor a church of that size and of that prominence. And I'm gonna tell you, there were very few churches in the world that were singing 90% of the hymns that they were lifting up Sunday in, Sunday out. Like, they were not singing Jesus Keep Me Near the Cross. They were not singing It Is Well With My Soul. They were not, like, the songs that we know, they were not singing Great Is Thy Faithfulness.
Wow.
Those songs were not a part of their worship practice. And so
blowing my mind, like, what is this? Wow. Okay.
Listen, we started, thank God for Dr. Priscilla Hilliard, who is no longer with us, but She was an amazing musician and singer. And literally, we started introducing hymns that were more reflective of our faith tradition during the midweek prayer service. And Dr. Hilliard was really great about like singing those hymns, teaching the parishioners that would attend those services during the week, those hymns. And then we would be able to introduce them on Sunday morning because we at least had a core of folk that had learned or become familiar with Lead Me, Guide Me, right?
Right.
So all of that is to say that led me to create a worship guide that was intentionally filled with hymns that I felt reflected the best of African American sacred music traditions and worship practice.
On a moral compass, charting freedom's waxing way. Oh yeah. Sometimes we startle how that ought to allow some things hard to explain. But when the cause we fight is pure, we can't let go because we're sure. Oh Lord. Our arc is long and bends towards justice when we
To be honest, you know, we live in such uncertain, sobering times. What is our Selma right now, and are we ready for this?
Yeah, and I mean, there are many Selmas right now. I mean, starting with what Selma was all about, which is fighting for voting rights. And so it was the three marches at Selma, which we don't always reference. It wasn't just one march from Selma to Montgomery. There were three marches. The first march led to Bloody Sunday because they didn't make it past the Selma Bridge. The second march was stopped by a court injunction that they could not cross the bridge. The third march, they finally were able to walk for 4 days. That's the other part that people don't focus on. That march from Selma to Montgomery took 4 days. So these were not, you know, faint-hearted people. These were folk that were determined, you know, the Diane Nashes and the Amelia Boynton Robinsons and the John Lewises. Like these folk were determined. And they were undeterred. Their heads were bloodied but unbowed. And so when we look at what they sacrificed in order to secure voting rights for us, we have to be concerned, starting in 2013, when the Supreme Court does away with the pre-clearance clause, which pre-clearance seems like such a benign word until you realize that all of the states that had a history of discriminatory practices when it came to our communities, they had to get federal approval. Like the federal government served as a watchdog to make sure that they couldn't just randomly change their voting laws or procedures in a way that wasn't fair.
Right.
When the court did away with that, it unleashed all of the things that we have seen since 2013, for those who have been paying attention. All of the voter laws in southern states that are not equitable, all of the practices of having to show voter ID and all of the switching of voter precincts and shifting of voter hours. Like, I mean, like all of that was made possible because of that seemingly benign decision by the court to do away with pre-clearance. 2013. Now in 2026, we know that the Supreme Court is considering removing another clause from the Voting Rights Act, which will essentially render that act null and void. It'll take all of the teeth out of that act. And so here we are, 6 decades later, 61 years later, and voting rights, that's still our Selma.
Yes, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
It is so good to talk to you, and I
You
would
as well.
I hope that I can at some point meet you in person and talk to
Oh,
you again. Would you close us out just by saying one more word about the power? And the reason why I'm asking it this way is, I was telling somebody I was meeting with. I met some people who have like a community choir, and I was musing about how things have changed so much now. When I was little, we had music class and we had
mm,
a book to sing from. My kids would never know. You open up the thing and we sing together, and we
hmm
know these
hmm
songs, whether
hmm
it's within the Black community or the wider community. Things are so different now. Can
Yeah,
you just give us a word about the power of communal singing, the synergy
yeah,
that comes from that?
yeah. I'll say this. There's singing is so instinctive for us as humans, right? There's something in us, even if we aren't given the gift of song, there's something in us that always yearns to find expression through music. It's interesting to me, even, friends of mine who don't have the best voices, like you put on a song that they connect with, and they'll be like,
Out
singing
here.
in their monotone pitch because there's something deeply instinctive about that. Um, and when you think about the power of us coming together to raise our voices, there is such strength in voice meeting voice, and then those voices meeting other voices. That collective action of singing together in unison or in harmony, um, I think it taps into something that is deeply spiritual. I think it becomes a form of deep calling to deep. I think it's also something that binds us because whereas words alone can often be divisive, um, whereas there's so much in our society that focuses on our differences, music and the arts are still like that form, those elements that help us to transcend the differences, the discord, and find harmony
Yeah.
and find unison and unity. And so, you know, I think in these times, if ever there were a time for us to sing, that time is now.
Ah,
Across the spectrum to find ways to sing, and to come together and be connected in and through song. As we sit here and just have this conversation, we now have representation of churches, chapels, choirs, and organizations in 39 of the 50 states. We're closing in on 100 cities.
mhm.
We have 20 denominations that are represented. And it's growing every day. Like we're getting more registrations every day. And for those who are watching this, you can go to justlikeselma.com to learn more about this movement,
Mhm.
but also to see how your church, how your organization can join in this hymn sing project, which is a central part of what we're doing by not just putting the hymn out,
Right.
but inviting people to sing the hymn, to share the hymn in a way that really will speak to their communities.